One of the questions that I get asked a lot is whether there is a benefit to having a book that is already graded, cracked out, signed by a creator, and regraded. And in this video, we are going to look at whether that makes good dollars and cents. Stay tuned. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of examples. And my hope here is that the methodology that we'll look at will help some folks out there, because essentially what we're going to do is to try to evaluate whether it makes sense to send a blue label comic in to have it come back as a yellow label by investing in getting that book signed by a creator. And I think that this methodology could work for people out there, but you'll have to decide for yourself whether you can make magic happen with this. So the first book that we're going to look at is a book that honestly needs no introduction. This is Wolverine issue number 1, the limited series, a fantastic comic that I happen to own as a 9.8. So that is what we are going to look at. We're going to look specifically at the 9.8, and what we will be able to see here, fingers crossed. Let me move that up a little bit, and I think that's big enough for folks to be able to see. The value of this blue label 9.8 is presently sitting at $670, which is not a bad amount of money. You can see the high water mark for this book was around $1,100 back in 2021, and at present sitting at $670. So how does the yellow label 9.8 fare? We will be able to see that here momentarily. And what we'll see is that the yellow label basically goes for $1,127.50. That is essentially the cost, or the value, if you will, of a yellow label. So the net difference between the 9.8 blue label and the 9.8 yellow label is a meaningful one. It really is a meaningful one. But to realize that value, you have to do some things, right? You have to send the book off to get it signed. And the signing fee that Frank Miller charges is basically $140. That gets you a signature and a grade of a comic. Now, if you're going to send the book in, you might as well take the best shot on goal by having that book pressed. So if you're going to get it graded and get it signed, or get it signed and graded, you might as well press it to get the best possible grade that you can get, especially if that book is going to be cracked out. It's going to be handled by CGC and also by Frank Miller. You want to press the book. So your total cost for a signature, a press, and a grade is $160. But that's not all of your costs, because the book has to be shipped to and fro. And so for the purpose of this exercise, we're gonna guesstimate that the shipping cost will be a total of $30, which means that your all-in cost is about $190. $190 for a clean, a press, a signature, and grade, and then shipping. All right. So what I decided to do was to work a little bit of some math here, right? So we took the value of the yellow label at $1,127 and subtracted from that the investment cost, right, of $190. That gives us a difference of $937. From there, I subtracted the value of the blue label book at $670, which gives us a net increase from blue to yellow label of $267. Now, some people will say it is completely worth it to take the 9.8 blue label, spend $200, roughly $190, and to net out $267. Some folks will say that that's not enough of an increase, which I get as well. You'll have to decide whether that is a meaningful increase for you or not. But the reality is this, is that if you crack out a blue label 9.8, there is a chance that that book will not come back at a yellow label 9.8, even if it is cleaned and pressed. Grading, as we've spoken about recently, is part art, part science. There's some subjectivity there. There's human error there. Potentially, you could actually lose a grade. So let's assume that you do indeed lose a grade. So what is the value of a yellow label 9.6? The value of that book, and we hopefully will get that here momentarily, is $700. That is the value of a 9.6 yellow label. And if you remember, the blue label 9.8 was $670. So you have a book, you invest more money into it, and your net difference is not all that great between the 9.8 and the 9.6 yellow label. Uh, I mean, some might even say they're relatively equal. The other thing that I will mention to you, I do believe, is that the high water mark for a 9.6 yellow label and the high water mark for a 9.8 blue label are roughly the same. So if you were saying, hey, well, I'll take the hit initially, but over time, this 9.6 yellow label will be worth more, maybe not, right? Because the 9.8, again, still has a value that is roughly equivalent to the 9.6 yellow label. Fingers crossed that that actually made sense. Hopefully I stuck the landing of that one. All right. So folks will have to decide for themselves whether it actually makes sense to send in some of these books. So I do want to apply this methodology to a few more examples because I think that it may be helpful for people. And then there's also a little twist that I'm going to put at the very end. So bear with me as I walk through some of this stuff. The next book that I want to look at is this one right here. Fantastic book. Fantastic Frank Miller book. This is the first appearance and origin of Elektra. Just a fantastic character, no doubt about it. Now, I have this book raw. I have this book guesstimated, a dirty grade, if you will, at a 9.2. So we're going to assume that this is a 9.2 blue label. All right. So the value of a 9.2 blue label at present is $245. If my numbers are correct, 245. There you go. February 2023, the most recent price for this book, 245. Let's see how a yellow label 9.2 fares. And we'll have that information here. It should be if I take that off, $512. So again, you have a nice little delta between a 9.2 blue label and a 9.2 yellow label that some may consider meaningful. But as we know, you have to invest in order to get that yellow label. So shipping, cleaning, pressing, signing, grading, and then reshipping, $190 cost. So if we do the math, 512 minus 190 gives us 322 minus the cost of the blue label at $245 gives us a net value increase of just $77. So at a 9.2 to get from the blue label to the yellow label, we will have a net increase of $77, which in my mind is not enough money to warrant taking the risk of sending this book in and having it come back at a 9.2 or even less. Here in October, the most recent price for this yellow label 9.2 in October was actually $512. Before that in June, it was $515. And before that, if we back up here in May, it was $1,095. That's actually a lot of money, right? And I think that that'll be important here in a hot second as we look at potentially what could happen if we lose grade from a 9.2 to a 9.0. So let's look at that real quick. The most recent price for this book was $1,200, but it's in May. It's in May. There are not a whole lot of these books on the population report. In fact, there's only 76 of them, so not a whole lot of sales, which means that there's not a whole lot of data points. But we saw the 9.2's value be high and drop with more recent sales. Potentially, you would see the same thing happen with this 9.0. So I don't think that we can actually use this most recent value of $1,216 in May of 2022 as the real evaluation of what this book is worth in the present day. Long story short, I don't know if this is a book that I will send in. I'll be completely honest about that because maybe it comes back at a 9.2, maybe it comes back at a 9.0. I'm having to spend a nice amount of money, i.e. $190, and potentially I won't really realize that much of a value increase for this book. Again, if it were indeed a graded book. So again, hopefully that methodology and the math actually makes sense for people. I want to look at one last example here. And this is one that I was a little disappointed in, to be honest with you. And I went looking for this book. This is Wolverine issue number 4. I like Wolverine. I like the limited series 1 through 4. I enjoy that story arc. So I have a Canadian price variant of this book right here. And I was not able to find a value for this one. So that was where I was disappointed. But the copy that I have is a Canadian price variant. and it is a 9.4. So, but for the purpose of this video, we are going to assume it is just a regular 9.4 that I'm thinking about sending in to have signed by Frank Miller. So let's just move forward with that assumption. And what you'll see here right off the top is that there isn't a whole lot of value in this book, right? There is not a whole lot of value in this book. The most recent price, and I think they just updated the price on me again. The most recent price that I had written down here for this book was $74. It looks like there's maybe been another sale or maybe a database update here that is taking it down to 68. 85, but for the purpose of this, we're gonna use my numbers. All right, we're gonna use the numbers that I have. So let's look at how the yellow label fares. The 9.4 yellow label has a value here of hopefully $200 is what we'll see. Yeah, $200 is what we see. Okay, so again, if we do the math of $200 yellow label minus $190 investment, that gives us a net difference of $10. We subtract from that the value of the blue label at 74, that gives us a net decrease of $64. So again, does not make sense to send this book in if it were, again, just a regular blue label, because we would have a net value decrease because of the investment that we are making into the book. But let's say that we had the best press job ever, and we got this book up to a 9.4. Let's look at what would happen if the 9.4 became a 9.6. All right, let's look at that. That would take the value of this book up to $211. All right, so we have a yellow label 9.4. We got a good press on it, got it up to a 9.6. Its value only goes up to $211, which means it's still a loss, right? The net value is $53, not as bad at 64, right? But $53. Let's say that the presser was just making magic happen, and then the grader just looked just favorably upon that book, and we got that book to a 9.8. Let's look at what would happen if it became a 9.8. From a 9.4 to a 9.8, that would increase the value of this book to $535, which is not bad. And again, if you do the math, that means you get a net increase. You actually get an increase if you get that lucky bounce of $271. That would be the net increase if you went from a 9.4 blue label to a 9.8 yellow label, and potentially that is meaningful money, right? Potentially that is meaningful money to people, but are you that lucky? I don't know the answer to that one. One of the other little twists that I wanted to add to this thing is that if you decided you wanted to just go all out on this book and get yourself a remark from Frank Miller, right? Get yourself a remark. A remark will run you $320. And if you decided to pull that trigger, essentially you would have a net loss on every single book that we just looked at, no matter how you shake and bake it, because the remark is incredibly expensive. So again, this is not to deter anyone from sending books in to be signed or remarked by their favorite creator. That is not what I'm attempting to do. But what I always attempt to do is to give people some things to think about. And this is a question that has come to me time and time again. I decided to maybe put together a little video to articulate it a little bit differently. So my hope is that this actually helps, right? At the end of the day, if you have an opportunity to get a signature from a creator that you absolutely love, you should absolutely do it. But if you are the type that wants to use head versus heart, then the methodology that I've explained in this video might actually be helpful to you. So with that said, we're going to wrap this video up. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. And if you found it enjoyable or not, still give the video a thumbs up and leave a comment behind to let me know your thoughts. If you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.